Hey, everybody, welcome to the Unconventional Therapist Guide to Nothing. My name is Dave. I'm joined here with my co host, Greg. Today, we are recording on actual Mother's Day, but this is obviously going to be released a few days later. But, Greg, we were just giving each other a happy Mother's Day.
Happy
How
Brothers Day.
Happy Brother's Day.
That's us. We're both brothers
We
here.
can't do that. We can't make a new holiday on a day that already
Yeah, I know.
exists.
I know.
Greg, I want to share something with you. I'm wearing a Mother's Day t shirt that people can only see if they are on video.
I know what it is.
Do you? What is it?
It's Friday the 13th part Deuce.
Deuce. But you
Yeah, I
know
thought
why
like
this?
one which should be the Mother's Day one,
Yeah,
right? Because
it is. It is. But
yeah.
this is my Mother's Day T-shirt because you can't see it right now. But if I pull it up a little bit, look who's on the bottom. His
Pamela Voorhees.
his mother's head.
So here's the thing that a nice little trivia for people. The killer in the first Friday the 13th is Pamela Voorhees. That's
Why
very
are you
sweet in the book.
spoiling it?
Yeah,
Why are you spoiling this what is it? 45-year-old
I know. I know.
spoiler.
Silly
Wow.
me. Spoiler alert.
And in part two, he has a shrine to his mother. So maybe part two is actually the Mother's Day episode because that's what we should all have for our mothers, right? A shrine with
Yeah, I
their
don't know if I
head
would love
right on
that.
the middle.
It's Mother's Day. It's one of those holidays I without fail somehow can't get right. It's almost like
Ooh.
I don't know if a lot of the guys out there can help me with that. Like, but it's almost like the expectations and you already kind of feel like you failed stepping into it, I think.
Yeah,
But
it's a tough one. It's a
it's a
tough one.
tough
I don't
one,
think I do great either. My mom is, she probably deserves better, but
Yeah. Our moms deserve better than us. Now, this is interesting that we're saying this because that leads us, that's a pretty beautiful segue into what we're going to be talking about
it
today.
actually really is
Yeah. So
unplanned.
just
Unplanned.
as, I was gonna say as planned, but that's because I'm a liar. Um, so Dave, you know what's interesting? We come back to this question often in the podcast. We really do. And it's almost what it's about. Like, why are we the way that we are? And in therapy, I think that there's two useful ways to kind of approach it. And one I call the Uber, where that's you don't really need to know where someone's been to figure out where they want to go and to help them get there. The Uber guy doesn't ask where you were; he asks where you want to go. The other one I invented is the tangled fishing line. And a tangled fishing line, like, us New Englanders, we know that if we cast out and the fishing line's tangled, that line doesn't go very far. But if we kind of go back and unravel like what the things that have happened, and it's a nice metaphor for like we can go a lot further if we kind of address the past,
That
right?
was like, that metaphor was so wasted on me.
You didn't get it?
Not at all. You want to know why?
No,
Never
not a
been
fisherman.
fishing in my life.
Dave, on Father's Day, I'm gonna put a little hat on you,
Gee,
grab the
thanks,
poles, and we're
Dad.
gonna
I like
we're gonna go fishing,
I
you
did
know?
go once. I guess I'm lying. I went once with my dad. It was like this little toy fishing
Yeah, it
pole,
doesn't count.
but it didn't really count. It's not like
Doesn't
real
count, buddy.
fishing.
Not if, especially if you're in a puddle. Doesn't count. Okay.
So yeah,
So, why do we act the way we act? And this is, tied to our identity for sure, something we love to talk about. So is our identity something that kept coming up for me when I was researching this, is our identity intrinsic or is it like decided for us by not only our environment, but by the people we're surrounded by when we're little? Um, and it's kind of weird to think like, are we solely products of that environment? I don't know, it's kind of unsettling to think about like just the stimuli that was around when you were a little kid, the things that you were exposed to are what create who you are. And I guess it makes sense, but um, you know, we're going to be talking about attachment and attachment theory and attachment styles and what happened in your formative relationships are going to, whether you like it or not, influence your future
yeah.
relationships. So it's almost like Dave, to me, I feel like it's a lot like shadow work, where it's like address those things that happen to you so that you can kind of be better for it going forward
Right.
and have an eye on it.
So I think this kind of work is interesting because for very much what you're saying is true. That idea that how much our environment really shapes who we are, and we all get to this point in our lives. Well, if you're listening to this, you've at least gotten to that point in your life where you've probably reflected or started to just kind of like think about who you are, what's my identity, all that stuff. And yeah, that's like looking at this attachment stuff. It's a lot about that. It's a lot about trying to figure out the factors that kind of made you the way you were, how you are in relationships. But the whole point of doing that work is so you don't have to be that going forward if you decide that that's something you don't necessarily find to be super helpful, or if
Which is
that's
so
causing you
interesting.
issues. Yes.
That's a good way to frame it because that kind of puts us right back where we typically were, where we feel comfortable, where it's like the choices you make are your identity. You are the things that
Yeah.
happen to you. You're who you want to be. And that's true, right? You have to look back at that and say, oh, this is kind of why I am the way I am. Am I comfortable with that? Does that align with my values? None of that's my fault, but it's my responsibility to either change it or keep it the same. Like,
Right.
it's
I
one of the
I
two.
truly feel we are sponges in so many ways. Like we can in some aspects we can blend into any environment at times. We can um pick up other people's mannerisms,
Sure.
behaviors, attitudes, right? We really are sponges in some ways. But that doesn't define us necessarily, nor does any of this stuff define us. We can define ourselves. We can choose what we want to see going forward. But like I always say, the starting point is self-awareness. So
Uh-huh.
I kind of love attachment theory. And Greg, one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode really bad was I got into it a while back, and I wanted to revisit it because I found it to be helpful exploring myself, helping patients explore themselves. And also, I think it's something that a lot of people want to hear about. I could be
I-
wrong about that.
Well, let's hope you're right.
It is kind of a popular topic for people to think about how they are in relationships in general. Maybe not the term attachment theory, but like trying to figure out who you are in a relationship. A lot of people want to know
Well,
about
yeah, it's interesting because it's reminiscent of love languages in a sense,
100%. And people
right?
love languages. That's for sure.
You got to tap into. Oh, yeah, no, and I think like self-awareness is a great place to kind of where you have to start, right? Whether or not we can't choose where we came from, but like being aware of that, and it's almost like Frankenstein. It reminds me of that too, how this person didn't choose their environment and it kind of create like your environment can, it's either a really good start or it creates a lot of work to do,
Yeah.
right? And we'll see that with the attachment styles. But
I
Dave,
wanted to apologize to anybody who's actually watching me on camera. I can't stop itching myself. I was just outside and I feel
okay.
like I just got bit by 1,000 mosquitoes. Mosquitoes are definitely out today.
Yeah.
And I literally cannot stop itching. So I just don't want anyone to think I'm like on something. And that's why I keep
Mm.
like leaving
Wow,
them.
Dave.
Sure.
Okay. Listen, don't worry about it, buddy. Didn't even notice that, but now I
Good,
do.
good. Yeah, yeah.
Now
I
I
can't
saw that
stop.
little scratch. So I want to bring up three statements to sort of prime the episode. And, Dave, and then you're going to really just go into it for a little bit here, Dave. But I think like this is three kind of statements to ask yourself to keep in mind as you go through this, right? Just to frame it in a kind of a little bit of a different way. And I'm not going to say whether they're, anxious or avoidant or disorganized or any of that stuff. Um, but I will say before I make these three statements, and I don't know if you felt the same way, but I know that I won't reveal that my attachment style yet, but I will say it sure as hell isn't secure, unfortunately. I mean, do you have a secure attachment?
No.
Okay, cool. Me neither. Anyways, all right. So the three statements.
That's why I got into this stuff in the first place.
Yeah, I'm not even close. So I find it relatively easy to be close to others. I feel they can trust me and I can trust them. I don't feel like I'll be abandoned. And, generally I feel pretty comfortable with people. So that's one statement that I hear few people say, but that's a statement. People feel that way. Here's another way people tend to feel. I find that others are reluctant to get close to me as I am to them. I worry my partner doesn't love me or they won't stay with me, or I want to be real close and I feel like sometimes they don't. And that, sometimes that scares me. And I feel like, I'm unlovable or I could be abandoned essentially, right?
Hmm.
And then some people feel that way. Some people might say something like this, like, I am uncomfortable being close to others or trusting them completely. Other people want me to be more intimate than I feel okay with. I don't trust. I avoid close relationships to protect myself. So that's like three kind of like where do you fit in that? And maybe it could be a mixed bag too, and we can talk about that one
Yeah.
towards the end. But and then one last thing for the parents, so you don't completely screw up your kids. I heard this quote a little bit too late, but Dave, I think you'll like this. Um, to be a good parent, you want to be a gardener and not a carpenter. So you want to kind of like nourish them and don't try to like build their identities in what you think they should be. Just kind of like see their identities develop and nourish them and help them along the way. Um, And also like correct them. I noticed that a ton too. Like parents don't correct their kids as much in public. Correct these freaking kids. It'll turn into monsters.
Why don't they do it?
That's it. Probably we probably all have way too much information. Partly because of this, maybe, right? They don't like to say no. They don't want to hurt them. They want to stay. I don't know. It's like parents these days want their kids to like them more than they want to raise them, which is
So
a
I
problem.
find I find that you're right, like with that attitude about not wanting to say no. I feel like people view the word no as being like harsh or overly strict or cruel in some way. No is super healthy.
Super
You
healthy.
have to also teach your kids to say no. So why shouldn't we be saying no to them? And it's, even if you have to say no in a stern way, that doesn't make you a bad person or you're not being mean. I feel like some
No.
people interpret no as mean, and it drives me bonkers at work, in personal life, and just like you got to say no.
Think about the alternative. Yeah, it's something I've struggled with in the past, David, and I know you've noticed that about me. But anyways, but think about the alternative, like with raising kids. If you never say no to a kid, they don't know what's best for them. That's your job, right? In the beginning,
And then
you
how are
say
they
yes
supposed
to
to
everything kids want. What are they going to end up doing? I
how
mean,
do
it's wild,
you how do you also respond to other people saying no to you in life if you can't even respond to your parents saying
right?
no?
I
So,
know.
yeah.
All right, Dave, get us started on this. We'll just talk about the technicalities, the whole thing, and then we'll kind of get into something fun towards the end.
Okay, well, just looking, there's interesting because you can look at attachment early life, and then like obviously as adults we're going to reflect on attachment too. But just to start, there's a few like attachment like stages, I guess you would say. So the first stage of attachment is called indiscriminate attachment, and that's between 6 weeks to 7 months. They begin to show preference for primary and secondary caregivers, and they develop trust that the caregiver will respond to their needs. While they still accept care from others, they start distinguishing between familiar and unfamiliar people and responding more positively to primary caregivers. This
Hmm.
is all in like kind of the ideal upbringing, I guess you would say. This is like kind of how it's supposed to go attachment wise. I would say this is probably like some of the framework for secure attachment.
Right.
So now obviously this isn't like happening in every single infant. The next one is discriminate attachment. So from about 7 to 11 months, they show a strong attachment and preference for one specific individual. They will protest when separated from the primary attachment figure. It's called separation anxiety. And they begin to display anxiety around strangers, stranger anxiety.
Very healthy,
So
healthy, I think.
yeah,
Right?
so it might be your mom that you're super attached to. It could be your dad. It could be a grandparent, whoever your caregiver is, right? And you kind of start to focus more on one than the other.
Yeah.
And Greg, I don't know. I think we kind of were talking about this the other day. Did you have a primary person that you were attached to?
Yeah. So when I was little, for sure, my mom,
Yeah,
she found
same.
me crying outside of kindergarten.
Yeah, we were actually talking about this a little bit, and yeah, you were saying that, and I was sharing that same. When my mom would have to go to work, my grandmother would watch me, and I spent the first, however, 20 to 30 minutes being a brat, crying
Yeah.
and upset that, um,
You're
so,
like, I want to go fishing, and they're like, never.
and then I never went fishing. Multiple attachments. So after approximately 6 months of age, children begin to form strong emotional bonds with other caregivers beyond the primary attachment figure. This often includes a second parent, older siblings, and grandparents. So those are
Yeah.
all like healthy attachments that an infant will have. So yeah, that's how it's supposed to look. Obviously, things can interrupt that,
Yeah.
and things interrupting those stages, we'll say,
But it's not
can
even, and before, not to interrupt you, but
yeah
it's not even that things can interrupt that. It's things will interrupt that.
yeah, no matter what, there'll
Yeah,
be
no matter
something
what.
like we were just talking about is an interruption, right?
Right.
Having to go to daycare, having another family member watch
Just
you during some of
having
these
to
stages.
exist in the way the world kind of manifests now, like the social structure and the having to go to work, having to go to date. That's what we were talking about. Having to go to daycare, having to go to work, having to do all these things. Like you're, it's kind of not how we evolved. That you're not supposed to drop your kid off somewhere with strangers and then just take off and then be gone for like 10 hours. That's not
Right.
how children develop properly.
Yes.
But again, we have, what choice do we have
So
in a
if
lot
those
of cases?
small interruptions can lead to some of these attachment styles forming, imagine
Yes.
what the bigger interruptions will do.
Mm,
So, a child being separated from their parents, removed from the home, some kind of DCYF kind of scenario. Just you can imagine all the different things. A parent passes away. Who knows?
yeah.
You're raised in the jungle by a bear named Baloo, and you
It can
don't
turn
have
out
your
okay.
you can turn out okay, but you're probably gonna have an attachment style, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Probably not secure. So, what are the types of attachments? Greg, I'll cover the first two, you cover the last two, okay?
Okay. Sounds good, buddy.
So, the first one we have is ambivalent attachment. So, children with ambivalent attachment style, they may become very distressed when a parent leaves as a result of poor parental availability. I don't know if poor is the right word, but lack of parental availability. These children cannot depend on their primary caregiver to be there when they need them, right? So another phrase or version of ambivalent attachment is also anxious preoccupied attachment or anxious attachment, think
Yeah.
something along those lines. So anxious, preoccupied adults often crave intimacy, but they may struggle with feelings of insecurity and fear of abandonment. Greg, this was that description you said earlier. They tend to be overly needy as they tend to be anxious and uncertain and lacking in self esteem. They crave emotional intimacy, but worry that others won't don't want to be in it with them. So for this person, a lot of it is that thought process of like, am I worthy enough for this person, or
Mm,
this person, will they ever view me the way that I view them, or will they ever be able to meet the expectations of a relationship that I want? So that's that person that when they're in the relationship, the whole time they're worried about it. They're
absolutely.
being overly needy. They're, when their partner leaves for whatever, they're texting them nonstop. They're being quote unquote clingy,
It
right?
is clingy. That's exactly what it is. And I think like if you need sort of an example do you want an example like of what it could look like?
Sure.
Like Donkey and Shrek. Anxious attachment, right? Kind of
Donkey and
constantly needs
Shrek.
that,
Sure.
reassurance,
Yeah.
always avoidant. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, like that's kind of like I like to I think it'll be fun to kind of put like a little face to some of these, you
Okay.
know?
Donkey and Shrek. So here's some signs of whether you as a listener, if you have ambivalent or anxious attachment. The first one would be if you have this style, you may be embarrassed about being too clingy, or your constant need for love and attention. You may feel worn down by fear and anxiety about whether your partner really loves you. There was one episode we have, I think it was the cognitive distortions maybe, and the person wrote, they wrote a comment on that episode saying, I'm so tired of trying to convince my boyfriend that I love him, or something along those lines.
Yeah,
That boyfriend has anxious attachment.
sure does.
Yes.
Sure
Another
does.
one is you want to be in a relationship and crave feelings of closeness and intimacy with a significant other, but you struggle to feel that you can trust or fully rely on your partner. Um, Being in an intimate relationship tends to take over your life, and you become overly fixated on the other person. I'm not going to lie, that's like every teenager these days. And
Yes.
that
Yeah.
makes a lot of sense if you think about what social media has created within the realm of like our own psyches.
Well, that and two working parents. It's like the
Oh,
economy
yeah, for
needs you to
sure.
have two working parents, right?
Yeah,
So like
that's a
you're
great
definitely
point.
getting dropped off at daycare.
Absolutely. All right. So yeah, that's a great point. I was actually thinking more of along the lines of like, I don't know if you hear a lot about like what kids are doing on Snapchat, or like how they just add random people, and they're like talking to strangers, and it's usually like romantic talk, or however you would want to say it, flirty talk, but it's like very easy to just start flirting with other people. And I find it like it's kind of scary how accessible it is for everybody these days. And for teens who are already a little insecure because they're teenagers, maybe they're already anxious attachment style because of their upbringing. And then just that idea that like, oh, my partner, my significant other could just start talking to someone else, flirting or sending like lewd photos or
Yeah.
sexual photos. Like
Yeah.
it's crazy. No wonder why they're all super insecure and jealous and overbearing and clingy.
You got a lot of teenagers coming in saying that their partners are sending lewd photos.
They don't use the word lewd, but yeah, I
No,
mean,
look,
I hear about it all
you,
the
you
time.
know, it's
Yeah,
funny that you mentioned that because my son is constantly on that thing. I don't know if he's on Snapchat or whatever, but like adding girls and then talking to them for a little bit and then they disappear. It's like they're not really getting a sense of like what a relationship should look like too. Everything's kind of fleeting. Everything is up in the air. Everyone's kind of looking to swing to the next branch to see like what's better for them. No one's really willing to put the work in and I think like that old love story, like our grandparents just riding it out for like 50, 60 years.
yeah.
I think that's a thing of the past, man. I think that's dead.
It sounds like it. The other thing they do is because they have these fleeting relationships. I mean, I don't know if it's every one of these like fleeting relationships, but I see it quite often with individuals with anxious attachment. They're doing a lot of like trauma dumping and info
Hmm.
dumping about themselves. And then like their relationship just fizzles out really quick. And then it's like they're not even bothered that they just shared so much about themselves. And then they just go to the next relationship and they do the same exact thing. And I'm like, things that we probably would have like it would have taken us a very long
Yeah.
time to like open up about. It's super easy for them now to open up about that stuff, but I feel like there's other things they don't open up about, which I
Yeah,
don't even know
sometimes
what
the
those other things
pendulum
are.
swings too far, I think. You
Yeah.
know?
They're not making meaningful connections. They think they are by oversharing personal information and then like relating to each other on
Mm.
that trauma level or that mental health level or whatever it is. But there's other things like values, just personality and characteristics that they're missing out on. Like, do we actually match these ways? They're
And
not getting to
they
know each
are
other
yearning for those connections, though, it seems though, doesn't it? Like they
for
really
sure.
are yearning for it and never actually getting it
Yeah.
because they want it so bad that they kind of they jump to the end instead of doing the meaningful stuff in the middle.
Right.
Right? It's like I
100%.
want it now instead of like, oh, this meaningful relationship. What makes it meaningful is that we've been together for a while. We've gone through a lot together, and that's what makes it meaningful. You know, the
Yeah.
struggle and the difficulty, not just you want to be right there at the end with like the grandparents on the rocking chairs at the end of their life, but that's not how it
100%.
works.
And not to say that the way that it's always been is always the best way either. I think sometimes we can be really close guarded with stuff about ourselves and maybe it's really hard for us to share at times, but still there's something meaningful about when you finally do get to that point.
Yeah, I agree.
Just a couple more of these and then we'll move on. You feel anxious or jealous when away from your partner and you may use guilt, controlling behavior, or other manipulative tactics to keep them close. Does this sound sort of like borderline?
Borderline? Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean,
it
it is.
does.
And borderline, I guess, would be a very extreme version of anxious attachment in some ways, in maybe other ones. But this actually, Greg, I'll share this because we're not going to use any names. We have you see the girlfriend, I see the boyfriend, and we have a couple that we both are involved with in therapy, not in other ways.
No, not in other ways. No upside down pineapples or anything.
Yeah. So we were able to talk to both of them actually, and we learned of this behavior that was going on that was kind of bothering the girlfriend, and it was funny because I didn't know about it until it came up when we all met. And when she goes and meets up with friends for like coffee or things like that,
Yeah.
he's nonstop texting her and upset that he's like, I'm just checking in, just checking in. And she was like, when I'm with my friends and we're having that time, I kind of want to just focus on them during that time. And it's kind of bothering me that you keep checking in. Now, it was funny when it kind of like came out and we were discussing it. We're like, you know why you're doing that, right? You're trying to make sure she's not doing anything.
Uh-huh.
Because then if she's not responsive, then you're like, oh, she must be doing something. So you got to cut it out, right? And that look
Because
on
by
his
wanting to
face,
keep her so bad, you're pushing her away.
right? And it was funny because like on that look on his face, it was one of those moments where it's like, I know you guys are right, but
Yeah.
damn you, I don't want to stop doing that because it's
No,
hard.
that's exactly right. It is hard. It's like it's all he's known for so long, so it is hard. It's like who he is, right?
And in his reality, and like if he took a step back, he was able to acknowledge, like, I know she's not going to do anything on this coffee date
Yeah.
I know nothing's happening. But in my mind, in that moment, when I'm sitting there with all this anxiety, I can't help but think, like, well, what is she doing though? Right.
Uh-huh.
and
and
that's
then
where your
fill in
mind
the blanks.
goes. Yeah.
Yeah,
So I mean, I think that is a great like depiction of anxious attachment right there. Right.
absolutely.
Let's see. Anything else notable? I mean, I think it's kind of explanatory at this
That's
point,
right. These
right?
aren't bad. These are like very accessible and digestible kind of
Yeah.
topics.
All right, let me cover the next one. Avoidant attachment. All right,
Okay.
so avoidant attachment for children. Uh, this is what it look like. They might tend to avoid parents or caregivers, showing no preference between caregiver and a complete stranger. This attachment style might be a result of abusive or neglectful behaviors, or caregivers, I mean. And children who are punished for relying on a caregiver will learn to avoid seeking help in the future. For adults, dismissive, avoidant adults are likely to avoid emotional closeness and may prioritize independence over intimate relationships.
Mhm.
They are the opposite of those who are ambivalent or anxious, preoccupied. Instead of craving intimacy, they're so wary of closeness, they try to avoid emotional connection with others. They'd rather not rely on others or have any others rely on them.
Which is, in a sense, so it's like saying it's the opposite, but really
It's
everyone's
Shrek.
craving intimacy, everyone's craving connection, and this is just their protective. So this is the way they protect from it, right?
It's
And you
Shrek,
want to
right?
know Shrek from Shrek? Is that what you're gonna say?
Yeah, it's Shrek, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it's Shrek. I mean, it's totally Shrek, right? You can just hear Shrek pushing Donkey away, pushing him away, pushing him away.
Yeah.
I don't care about Princess Fiona. Hell with her. Even though he loves her, he's like, ugh, I hate her.
And then he
You
go
know?
farts in a mud puddle, right?
Yeah.
And then the bubble comes
Shrek's
out.
actually learn a
Mhm.
lot from Shrek, apparently. I'll tell you, it's you do push people away this way too, both ways. Anxious. Even if you were sticking with like those weird Disney movies, Marlin from Finding Nemo, that's an anxious attachment. That trauma happened, and he doesn't want Nemo to run away, so he kind of like he's overbearing, and look what happens. So you have to go find him.
Beast
Yes.
from Beauty and the Beast, right?
Definitely, that was use from you. These is definitely avoid an attachment. Yes,
Get
and
away
he's
from
all
me. I'm a
yeah.
monster.
Get away from me! I
I'm a beast.
yeah, I'm a beast. And how did Beast become the Beast? He had to
Yeah, it
be
was a
hurt or
spell.
damaged, or yeah, it was a
It
spell.
was a
So
spell put on him.
that's got to have
Mhm.
some deeper meaning that we can't really connect with right now.
And then he had that
Spell.
rose that he had to like do something with,
Mm-hmm.
or he'd be a
Mm-hmm.
beast forever.
Gaston, him
Freaking
too.
Gaston, dude.
You know,
Freaking Gaston.
narcissistic personality disorder, but that's a
For
different
sure.
topic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, go on.
I mean,
Sorry.
are
Yeah,
we have doing a
Shrek from
whole
Shrek
episode
for sure.
on Beauty and the Beast at some point? Wow. And Shrek?
There's a lot there. Stockholm syndrome is there.
Yes. All right. Signs you are avoidant attachment. You're an independent person, content to care for yourself, and you don't feel you need others. Hmm.
Hmm.
The more someone tries to get close to you or the needier a partner becomes, the more you tend to withdraw. You're uncomfortable with your emotions, and partners often accuse you of being distant and closed off, rigid and intolerant. In return, you accuse them of being too needy. You're seeing a pattern here. You're
Absolutely.
prone to minimize or disregard your partner's feelings, keep secrets from them, engage in affairs, and even end relationships in order to regain your sense of freedom. Right now, everybody who is like, I think that's me, is like, oh, wait, that's not me. No, that's terrible.
Yeah, yeah. But this is like every character in every like rom-com starting off, right? Like they're
Yeah.
kind of avoiding like
I do
no,
what
I'm
I'm
alone. I'm
now.
a loner. I'm high powered. I'm this, I'm that. Yeah, no, it's
You know
it's
what's funny? There's a societal twist happening right now. I feel like every rom-com back in the day always had like that woman who was just like down on her luck with love. She was
yeah.
just like maybe she was just like kind of like clumsy in love or whatever. Like she would always men would leave her because she was too sloppy or messy or whatever. But now it's like now the woman's too empowered and like business lady doesn't want to give into love. They're all avoidant attachment styles. I feel like it's a total like switch of
Like
how they're
180.
portraying women.
Yeah.
And I think it's like, I mean, it's fine, it's good. I think seeing women more independent is a better depiction and just like making them look like they're so desperate for love, but they're like too clumsy to, you
Yeah,
know.
and
But why does it have to be all one way or the other though at the same time?
it's just not that way. But like the thing is, what's going on with both these avoidant and anxious attachment is your you don't want you're not allowing yourself to become vulnerable. And if you don't become vulnerable, you can't grow. I mean, and if you don't become vulnerable, you can't have love.
Also though, it's a little psychological though, because the anxious attachment people think they're super vulnerable in general.
Uh-huh.
They think just being in a relationship is vulnerable. Like,
And the
holy
avoidance
crap.
think they're super strong.
Yeah, they're like, I can't be vulnerable. Like, why should I be vulnerable? I don't need to be vulnerable. I got myself, I
Yeah,
rely on myself, right? But it's all that insecurity of like, well, actually, they're actually sort of, if you think about it, they're afraid of getting broken too.
both. Absolutely.
So
100%.
yeah,
They're
so
both protective
right,
strategies, just
right.
different.
Let me see. Let me just capsulate this. So while you think you don't need close relationships, the truth is we all do. Everyone, humans are all hardwired for connection, and even someone with avoidant dismissive attachment wants a close, meaningful relationship, but they just can't get over their deep-seated fear of intimacy.
Yeah,
So
because it's so you'd have to like find a way to have people tell you what it is that they want, truly want. And then you have to get to that somehow and then say like, well, what is getting in the way? Is the way you're behaving getting you closer or further away from that?
I think a lot of
Um,
those like players, those
Players,
guys
yeah.
that are like historically known as players, a lot of them are just avoidant attachment.
Afraid of getting hurt. That's it,
It's like you
right?
think you're so cool because you're a player. You're just avoidant attachment.
Hit him where it hurts, Dave.
Think you're so cool with all your girls? You avoidant attachment guy?
Let me tell you a little bit about your attachment style, pal.
Not so cool
So
now, are you?
I'll tell you the cool one. One of the cool ones right now is disorganized. Anytime you say you're saying disorganized, things are getting a little hairy. Um, and children with disorganized attachment, they comes from this confusing mix of behavior. They're disoriented, they're dazed, whatever, right? And this probably comes from a parent. I think in a sense they have these different approaches to the same thing. Like if you get punished for something one day and the other day you get praised for it, or one day you do something and it's fine, next day you're getting hit with it, right? It's for it. It's just this. They're a source of comfort, parents, and they're also a source of fear, and it's a very confusing thing for a child.
Yeah.
Like, what is this thing? What are people, right? When you're a
Right.
kid.
Right.
So like you can imagine like I don't know if we're gonna do like a pop culture thing like the Joker I guess would be a disorganized like that's how that would happen. He kind of like talks about that a little bit. I don't know if anybody's into that, but whatever. Um but like disorganized, disoriented attachment style, also referred to as fearful avoidant attachment style, it comes from this fear
Wait, which
that's
Joker were you
often a
just referring
result.
to?
I was referring to the see people are gonna think I knew comic books for a second there, but I don't. In the one Heath Ledger, where he's constantly kind of he tells a story about like what happened with how to get the scars, but it's like a different story every time.
I was just gonna say that. Yeah. So you never know.
Yeah, so it's kind of like interesting. He's kind of all over the place.
I feel like you
Uh,
have to like preference which Joker you're talking about because they all like
you're
kind of have
right.
a different like backstory a little bit.
They
And that
all
one
kind
doesn't
of
really
do.
have a real backstory because he never tells it.
You know what's funny? Batman kind of has a similar shitty childhood,
Oh yeah,
and the thing is, it's like that
he's
tells
avoiding
you
attachment.
something, right? Absolutely, absolutely, he is.
He's sitting in that freaking
I,
castle like all
I just want to
alone.
be alone.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? No, you don't.
till he finds out that young lady. But he
Yeah,
wears a
it just
mask while he gets to know her.
man, it's getting deeper and deeper. So you're talking about in disorganized attachment. You're talking about so you're talking about a neglect, which could give you an anxious attachment, but like this is severe neglect, like Beth Thomas neglect or abuse. Beating and withholding. Adults with this style of insecure attachment they feel like they don't deserve love or closeness or friendship and they have no real connection and they're terrified of getting close to people and that often results in these conflicting emotions and unstable relationships which now you're starting to sound a little bit really borderline, right?
Hmm.
Where you're like you want to be close and you tell them you want to close but you also hate them.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
like
You know,
really quick.
this reminds me of kids that maybe grow up in like foster system and maybe
Yeah.
get bounced around a lot. Like I worked with, I don't know if I ever shared this on here. I worked with a kid that had been to 18 different group homes by the age of like 17 when I met him.
that
18.
That's
different
wild.
placements.
And you can imagine the different, like, oh, parents behave like this. Oh no, parents behave like this. Oh no, parents behave like this over and over and over
But
again.
this was
And these are
group
just
homes too.
humans.
This is like staff. He doesn't even have parents to like identify. You have like a group home manager and staff, and then they're constantly changing. You never get close to anybody in that short amount of time. It's crazy. And obviously you can imagine how difficult that person was to work with.
It sounds really sad.
Mm, he's in
It
jail.
does. So, if you're an adult and you have disorganized attachment style, you'll likely never learn to self-soothe. So, like, you're gonna have this severe emotional dysregulation, which is tough kind of place to be to have productive relationships, right? And so both relationships and the world around you are like frightening and unsafe. So you never really feel comfortable because you experienced this as a kid. Like this is what you know. And as an adult, you might try to like find yourself in the same abusive patterns so that you feel comfortable. It's all you know, which is a strange thing. And that's why when people get into these abusive relationships, people are like, "What are you doing?" It's like, well, that's how they know love in a sense. They were never taught love the right way or felt what it was supposed to be like. This is the closest thing to home for them,
Yeah,
which is
that's
hard to.
sad. Yep.
You're wired that way, right? So you probably find intimate relationships confusing and unsettling, often swinging between emotional extremes of love and hate for a partner. Does that sound familiar? You may be insensitive towards your partner, selfish, controlling, untrusting, which can lead you to have this explosive, abusive behavior because that's what you know, right? Like you abuse and you explode, and sometimes you're loving and sometimes you're hating, and that's just because you have no sort of compass to guide you to what an appropriate relationship is supposed to look like. So you're just kind of out there in the woods. You have no idea. So you exhibit these antisocial negative patterns, and sometimes you treat it with alcohol, drugs, and these kinds of people with this attachment style are going to be at times, violent and
Right.
aggressive,
Right.
right?
Yep.
So it's kind of scary.
That's
So,
that's a super challenging one, and like,
oof.
yeah, that's probably one you hear people talk about the least. Like, you hear people talk about avoidant and anxious attachment. I don't hear people talk about the disorganized attachment, and this is why. Like,
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's tough.
And
I'm assuming it's
unraveling that is tough, right?
right, and I'm assuming people that even are experiencing all those things. How do you even know that that's like? I'm sure those people are probably not doing attachment theory work because there's so much going on in their life.
No, that's when I think the Uber makes sense. That's when
Right.
so like the past, you need to say, all right, like let's just the past is gone. Let's think about because again, like you said before, everyone kind of craves this meaningful, intimate relationship, but these people they feel unworthy, they're afraid of getting hurt, they really have no, reference for it at all. So it's like maybe like see something that you think looks good to you in a relationship. How do you think you have to behave to have that work out? Like what are the kinds of can you be screaming and yelling and getting upset? You kind of have to be this steady Eddie. You know
Sure.
what I mean?
Oh, and I was
And
also kind
that's
of identifying like I don't even know if you get to the attachment stuff because then you also got like you were saying like drugs and alcohol use stuff going on. Maybe
yeah.
there's stuff like legal issues because of the aggression, violence issues. Like there's so many other things that probably even get in the way of you saying, "Hey, let me check out my attachment style."
And people are like, that person's an asshole.
Right, right.
You know what I mean? And it's like we've talked about again on this, like we've mentioned this concept of it's hard to hate someone if you know their story. So if you went back and saw that person's backstory and all the things they went through, you might not think they're an asshole. But in the end, an asshole's an asshole. And it may not be your fault you're an asshole, but it's your responsibility to change it.
And next time
You know?
someone says something like that about someone, like, "Oh, he's being such an asshole," I'm gonna be like, "Maybe he's just disorganized attachment."
I mean, geez, have you ever thought of that?
I feel like you have no empathy.
Yeah, yeah. And that's another thing that it's just hard. And it is. It really is difficult to kind of like wrap your head around. Now, Dave, should we talk about the one that we kind of can't relate to at
You mean
all?
the boring one?
Yeah, yeah. Like, are people okay?
No,
So
it's way
I know
more frequent than
so that's gonna where you should feel better as parents and as people. These are all on some kind of spectrum, right? So even if you're a secure attachment, you can have a little taste of each of these things, right? This doesn't mean you have to be perfect, but secure attachment is it starts with children who can depend on their caregivers. And when they show distress or separated, they know that they're going to be reunited and they have joy when they're reunited. Just things that make sense. Like, oh, okay, well, you're leaving me. This stinks a little bit, but I'm okay because I know you're coming back from daycare to pick me up, you know?
Yeah.
So they're reassured and the caregiver always kind of shows up. And when they're frightened, they are comfortable seeking reassurance from the caregivers. They're comfortable going to someone and saying, "Look, I'm scared or I'm dealing with this, like help me." And they receive help. And I think it's the research says that's 81% of people have this attachment style. And I think that's high, but at the same time, I think most people are trying their best. And you see that with most families that when a kid's scared or tired or this or that, they're kind of there for them. Only sometimes they're not, but more often than not, I would say 81% of the time, people are being good parents.
Yeah.
I think that's fair to say, right?
Well, I was also listening to someone who was discussing this say it's really hard to get good statistics on this stuff though because
Yeah,
it's all about self-reporting.
totally.
And as we know, like self-reporting is a really challenging way to take data or get real consistent data, right?
Almost impossible. And that's how we have to like formulate all our diagnosis. Everything we do is self-reporting and sort of getting collateral from other people and understanding
Yeah.
people through the things we see and the things it's tough. So self-reporting, I don't know how you get a number like 81.8%. You probably should just kind of round that up or do something with that. Say
Sure.
80, right? So here's some signs of a secure attachment. You appreciate your own self-worth and you're able to be yourself in an intimate relationship. And you're comfortable expressing your feelings, your hopes, and your needs. You could probably say no like a normal person, not like myself. You find satisfaction in being with others and openly seek support and comfort from your partner. Like, so if things are hard, you'll ask for help. That's kind of out of my wheelhouse, you know? They don't get overly anxious when they're apart from a partner or any kind of like family member. And similarly, you're happy for your partner when they need support or if they need something, you're happy to help and you're able to maintain your emotional balance and you manage your emotions in healthy ways and your conflicts in the relationships are handled in healthy ways. So, and when you're faced with like these hard things in life, like setbacks, disappointments, and misfortune and failed relationships, you're resilient and you bounce back because you know like your parents came back to pick you up on daycare uh you'll get back on that old horse,
Right.
and I think fine, 80% of people are that way. I I don't know. I feel like I'm not, and I don't feel like my parents did a bad job. I think I'm a combination of anxious and avoidant at the same time.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
so
So I had this really cool workbook and I lent it to someone and now I no longer have it. But
is it me?
no, I don't think
Oh,
it was. It was a patient. And if they're listening, if you
just
have it, give it back, please.
yeah,
I really could have used it for this episode. But it actually had some cool stuff in it because it had these quizzes you can take to, gauge your styles. And I was definitely a combination of anxious and avoidant. And it was pretty spot on though, because it really nailed how I am very avoidant when it comes to like communication and conflict and stuff like that in relationships. And I think at times I can be very anxious, but also, you know, I don't think like like I also think it can kind of change
sure.
because like
Yeah.
right now I don't feel very anxious attachment. I'm probably more avoidant. Um, but yeah, I think it kind of can shift and depending. I think a lot of it can also depend on the person you're with and how kind of they react to some of the stuff.
Hmm.
So some people I think can make things exacerbated, and some people
Sure.
maybe can be very soothing and calming for someone. So I think, but like
That's
also
actually a
though,
good point, and maybe that's how good relationships, you mesh. Like someone who's
to
willing to be supportive of
sure,
your needs
to
like
an
that.
extent though, you have
Yeah.
to also like understand each other and where you're coming from because like we have two individuals that we see who probably are both very anxious attachment or no like you did couples for them, both of them are anxious attachment, but I don't think that there's enough like understanding on each end of each other's anxious attachment to really
Yes.
like be able to kind of like what's the word I'm looking for, comfort each other or
Yeah. Yeah.
solve those problems together. So
Instead, they're like bound. It causes more
bounces off.
problems.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it bounces off. They bounce off of each other, and it just leads to more issues. So, like, I do think like doing this work and being aware of who you are is really helpful in so many ways. It reminded me of the we did the Jungian archetypes, right?
Yes.
Was that what the one we did? The person?
Well,
No, there was the enneagrams, right?
oh, finding out that, yeah,
It
yeah,
reminded me of that because like you discover about yourself not just to have the knowledge about yourself, but to figure out, well, if this is what I'm strong at, or this is like what I have going on, what do I do in order to fix it? I have to
yeah.
work on focusing on the things that I'm not so strong in, right? So if I'm
That's
super
so that's the
insecure,
archetypes too, though.
yeah,
It's enneagrams and archetypes.
I
Yeah.
gotta, if I'm super insecure, I got to work on building up my self confidence, rationalizing, reframing my thought process with some cognitive behavioral therapy so
Sure.
that I don't think everybody's cheating or leaving me. And
Yeah.
if I'm avoidant and I see that I'm pushing people away, I have to start to challenge myself like, hey, this might be a moment where maybe I share a little bit about myself and I allow someone to come in a little bit. So, with all that being said, here's two attachment disorders that may develop in childhood that I think could be, something that I won't go too much into these,
Well,
but
one we
just
have an episode on,
yes,
so
right.
that's good.
So reactive attachment
Yeah.
disorder. And I also kind of talked about that even with like in our borderline episode, I talked about reactive attachment because I almost feel like children with reactive attachment almost turn into like borderline adults, I think in
Yeah.
many ways,
Yeah.
right?
Like an emotional PTSD,
Yes.
untreated PTSD in a sense.
The
I would say.
other one is very interesting, disinhibited social engagement disorder.
Okay.
So reactive attachment, I'll just quickly remind people that what that is. It occurs when children do not form healthy bonds with caregivers. This is often a result of early childhood neglect or abuse and results in problems with emotional management and patterns of withdrawal from caregivers. So again, it's that hot and cold. I'll pull you in, push you away. Trust me, when I was working with teens in the group home that I worked at, I saw reactive attachment all the time because these were kids either taken out of their homes by DCYF or they were abandoned by their parents, or like that kid I said who had been to 18 different group homes. Trust me, there was no way these kids wanted to start strong, healthy relationships with anyone. So it was constantly pushing and pulling away. So that was very present in that work. And you can kind of see how that forms. Disinhibited social engagement disorder is an interesting one. So it
Mm.
affects a child's ability to form bonds with others and often results from trauma, abandonment, abuse, or neglect. It's characterized by a lack of inhibition around strangers, often leading to excessively familiar behaviors around people they don't know and a lack of social boundaries.
I've seen this.
I have two, and it's very fascinating.
Yeah. Off-putting in
Yeah,
a sense. Yeah, it's
100%.
kind of yeah, it's strange in a way. But so and it's just a different way to kind of look at it. Like, all right, I'm going to seek it in everyone because I'm not getting it from the people.
Exactly. The kid that I saw this with, he had been sexually abused, physically abused, had a bunch of like also in group home care, bounced around a bunch. And we would go out in public, and this was the kid who was literally talking to everybody that walked by him. Any adult that was in like uniform they were super interested in, and they would go up and act like they were best friends with the person. They would stare at people until the person would look at them so then they could like interact with them,
Yeah.
just constantly looking for engagement. But then at home, very hostile, like relationships with people that were actually supporting them or had difficulty making and maintaining friendships with people that were peers to them. Very fascinating.
Lines crossed. Get your lines crossed a little
100%.
bit. It's okay. So yeah, and these are interesting and just kind of like a little bit of a tiny recap here. So the anxious attachment is gonna when you have this inconsistent or unreliable caregiving during childhood, abuse, neglect in varying forms, not wildly dangerous. Avoidant abuse, emotionally unavailable parenting, rejecting, um, and if it hurts enough, after a while, you're going to learn to avoid that. And so secure attachment is going to be that boring one we talked about. That's you feel safe at home and seen and valued and you've got this continued support. And if you want to see how that manifests in adults, if are you a fan of The Office?
Yes.
Jim and Pam's relationship. I always found it unrealistic. You know what I mean?
Nerds, nerds,
Yeah, yeah,
nerds.
like come on. I just don't identify with that at all, and it sucks because I want to.
Yeah, but Jim and Pam's relationship before they were actually together is way more interesting than Jim and Pam's
Absolutely.
relationship
So
when they're together, right?
I think I'll be like completely honest here. Like I feel like I'm really good with the individual and how to be the best agent for yourself and overcome negative thinking, all kinds of things like that for the person. Relationships have never been my strongest thing. I think I'm okay for whatever reason. I do pretty good with the couples therapy, but like just I tell when I tell them things, it's like I don't. That's not what I would do, but it seems good.
Let me also ask you this question. So
Sure, yeah,
you identified having a mix of avoidant and anxious. Do
yeah.
you feel like you were way more anxious as a younger person than you are today? Do you think your attachment style has shifted in one way or another as you've become a 40 something year old man?
I know it's funny because like maybe it is like now that I'm kind of like really thinking about it, I think it just is avoidant. But I'm able to I'm able to recognize that like it's comes from a place of insecurity at times. You
Okay.
know what I mean? So
Sure.
it's an anxiety, but I recognize that instead of just pretending to like I'm not
Ooh.
deceiving myself that like it's all like I don't care. I can if
Is the insecurity based in different things than it used to be? Like I picture like as younger individuals, we're constantly worried that people are going to leave us. Is it still about that or is it about other things in general?
yeah, that's a good question. I don't really know. Like I guess it is kind of always about loneliness in a sense. I think that's the ultimate fear of everyone.
Mm.
Like that isolation and um, I think that's ultimately it. Like, um, it's difficult relationships. I think it also, honestly, when I think about it, I think I had my first girlfriend crushed my heart. And I think honestly, since then, it has nothing to do with my parents, really. I think it was that.
That's what I always say too. Like
Yeah.
my first breakup that I actually cared about
Yeah.
hurt, and
Oh,
that
yeah.
stuck with me, and it made me not want to really like let someone else do that to me. So, but then it
Yeah,
was
and I
also
really took on that like that because I was my the way I portrayed like presented myself was important to me. So I kind of put up that I don't care, like whatever. And it
yeah,
just stuck with that and I
sure.
did care.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
And also like it made me for me like the first one happened and I like didn't see it coming
Mm,
and it was really no like to me in my head it was I didn't like have an idea of what I didn't supposedly I didn't do anything wrong.
yeah.
And it just wasn't the person wasn't feeling it. So I think as I got older and I don't even know if I realized that until much later, but like I think that kind of seeped into every relationship was like it
The
could
shoe can
just
drop at any time.
right.
Yeah,
So I'm not
that's
going to let
that's
myself
exactly
be too
right.
vulnerable because if I do, then and yes, it's developed in a lot of different ways. It's interesting because I think it also impacts who you start to look for, what personalities you look for, what you become like attracted towards.
Oh my God, yeah, even at work. So it's funny because so I work at the hospital, and I'm not gonna say any names or get too like into this because this is a thing that happened where I kind of tiny. So there was this woman that came in, and history of sexual assault, right? She happened to be autistic, and so there's one clinician, so there's one person kind of looking at it from the lens that we're looking at it from, right? So this person comes in there, like, so there's the autism there. And so it's a different, it's very sensory input is crazy at an emergency room. So this person's already kind of like on edge, comes off as combative, comes off as like dangerous, comes off as psychotic. And so it's like immediately like, oh, we gotta like restrain this person. And it's a dangerous scenario. We gotta restrain this person. So all that happens. And I'm like, no, like let's not do that. Let's kind of give this a shot to kind of like let this is if there's a history of sexual assault now we've got hands and legs tied. That's a very scary thing for someone. That right back in the moment. That's terrified. So I'm like, all right, we got to give this a shot. We got to at least be able to say that we did this, gave this a shot, and we did. And then it got, a little more intense for a little bit, and we ended up having to like kind of, do what you have to do from that point. But like everyone was like, "Hey, you took a safety risk there," and it's like, yeah, but like I tend to come from the place of like we are taking managed safety risks because it's not just about our safety, it's about the safety of the person. More
Right.
importantly to me, like that's what it's about. Like I'm coming at it from the well-being of this person's mental health. And it's a calculated safety risk. This was younger person who wasn't really like a threat in my opinion. And it didn't end up being no one got hurt or anything like that. But like so when I'm thinking about my anxious or avoidant attachment, I'm like, "Oh, if they don't like that, I'll fucking leave tomorrow." You know what I mean?
Right, right,
Like I
right.
immediately go there. I don't immediately I'm not like, "Oh, well, let me like think about it from a security point of view or from like a medical point of view." I'm immediately like, "Oh, you didn't like my decision? Okay, well, fuck you." And I'm sorry for saying that. But
I so I'm kind of like that as well. When I get feedback that doesn't
yeah.
sit well with me, I get in my head and then I'm like, I'm gonna quit my job. I don't
Yeah,
need them.
yeah. Talk about like a jump, right? It was like, you know what? I'll quit tomorrow. I
I'll
literally
just
said
quit.
that.
I'll just
I
quit.
quit.
Hmm.
I said like some like, arrogant shit. Like I'm booked out till October. I'll quit tomorrow. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Like,
don't need this, right?
yeah,
And that also probably is a reason why we have multiple things to like fall back on.
because we know
So
we'll
we
do that
can say
shit.
that.
You know,
Yeah.
it is what it is. And hey, we all have our things. So hang in there. And so
I
yeah,
will
obviously,
just add this one last thing. Um, I think when I was younger, it was always about people leaving me. I notice more now my anxiousness or like like the thing that I'm more insecure about now is like not meeting my full potential in life,
mm,
which is a weirder thing. It has nothing. I feel like but like also that seeps into relationships because I think I would get worried that like if I give too much of myself or I get too involved in something, I won't be able to do the other things I want to be able to do in my life
mm.
that I feel like. So I don't know. I don't know if that's
Here's the
better
thing, we're all
shift or
just
what.
we're all just works in progress.
Yeah,
That's ultimately. So the secure attachment thing, let's try to let's just something to kind of like aim towards, you know? But like we all got work to do, that's for sure.
absolutely.
Yeah, so that's the attachments. I mean, and if you wanted a quick recap on disorganized, just like if you didn't get it, it's just that sometimes your parents flip and sometimes they're fine, but it could be the same thing and you just don't know how to respond. It's just inconsistent violence, punishment, all that stuff. Um, but yeah, no, this stuff's interesting and it's kind of on the nose, but it's also true, you know? We only have so many choices when we're kids. We don't get to choose who we're placed around. And whatever is the product, we're like a little piece of clay, and whatever the mold comes out of it, it's like, but we're still a piece of clay that can
Yeah.
change and turn into whatever.
If you're someone who's constantly in relationships that end in similar fashions or with you feeling confused,
hmm.
do some of this work.
Yeah, it's
um
you. That's fine because I know that because it's you and it's also me, and it's also
right.
Dave. Like it's we
It,
like it just is,
it really is. I think if people look at this stuff and try to figure out like where do they fall in here, it helps them navigate relationships a little better. And I just think it can be helpful. So
Huge piece in like relationship work. I'm
sure.
starting to realize,
Yep.
huge piece.
Yeah. All right. Well, another episode
On the ground.
down on the ground.
Yep.
All right, everyone, I'm going to make a huge pitch here. Well, obviously, we are going to ask you one more time. If you haven't left a rating or review, please do so. It's super appreciated and helps the podcast just get shared more often by the platforms that do so. But the other thing I want to ask everybody to do is we've been talking about this Patreon thing that we started. There is like obviously there's the paid tier for the Patreon where you get bonus episodes. Eventually, you'll get episodes that are no longer available to the public. But there's also a free level of Patreon. So if you're not ready yet, if you decided like, oh, I don't want to, contribute money because I don't have it or whatever, no shame in
Yeah,
that.
we get it. Yeah.
There's also a free level. We would love for people to shift over to Patreon. You get the video episodes, which are better because you get to see our faces. So of course that's better. But
Yeah.
also there's other things we can do on Patreon. Like we can start up chats, we can have community discussions. So we would really love to build a community over there. So if you are able to, I recommend shift over to Patreon,
Yeah, start
sign
free.
up,
Who cares?
subscribe to the page, do the free or the tier for the paid tier to get those bonus episodes. And let's build a little community because there's so many people that reach out to us and they have great stories that they share with us about how some of the topics have been helpful to them or how they connected with others listening to our episodes. So let's get over there. Let's talk about the stuff. If you have questions for us, you have questions for other people, let's have group discussions. I just think there's so much potential here for this to be something so much bigger than
Oh,
just
Dave, you know what?
an hour a week.
I'm doubling down. I know sometimes, Dave, you think to yourself, you say, Dave, is Greg's hard in this? Let me tell you something, Dave. I I don't know how crispy I sound right now, but I want to spend a pretty penny on this thing. So I've just doubled down on this podcast. I got this beautiful mic. You can't see it. I thought you would be able to, but
Nope. Thanks,
it
BetterHelp.
is here. Um, but I mean, this thing's pretty cool, you know?
Nice.
So
And he has a camera that he's got to hook up.
I do. Yeah. Yep. That's next. As soon as I get this
Freaking
new,
recording at 720p instead of the 1080 we should be at. I'm supposed to be looking crispy clear right now, but because Greg won't hook us up, we can only.
you know what, Dave, you're right. And I'm glad you put me on the spot in front of all
I gave it to
the
him like
foolishness.
3 or 4 months
Yeah.
ago.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy. And I still, and
I
we're on
gave
that
him a
path.
webcam, everyone, and he hasn't hooked it up
We're on that.
in
We're on that
months,
path. And it's we'll see you soon.
and it's ruining
And
the
I think,
quality of
you know,
our
Dave, I'm gonna
videos.
tell the people that next week I'm just going out on a lim here. It's gonna kind of be a tiny bit of a different format, but I'm actually really excited about it because I notice when we use this type of format, I think it's when we really shine. So I'm gonna put a lot of pressure on us for this, and also it's gonna be in some ways less pressure. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah. So
Um,
if you're listening, please don't be thrown off that the topic title sounds horrible. Just listen.
please, yeah, yeah, give it a shot.
Okay.
I like the title though.
It's people are not going to know what the hell that is. So
Okay, fine.
I'm
All right,
not saying
buddy.
it's going to be a bad episode. I'm just saying the title alone, though, is going to hurt us. But the episode content, if we can
Now
share it
that's
enough, that will
yeah,
get, we got to
that'll
get
be
it
a
out
banger.
there. So yeah, we're also on social media trying to upload clips and stuff like that. Share them if you can. We'd love that.
Yeah,
Tell people about us, whatever, or
please.
make us your dirty little secret.
Whatever you want to do. Just keep listening.
You dirty little
Dirty, dirty.
whatever.
What attachment style is that?
That's that secure attachment right there,
Dirty
boy.
attachment disorder.
Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Have a great night. We'll see you next
Ooh,
week.
dirty attachment disorder is dad.
Daddy.
What it is, I guess. Happy. That's for Father's Day. That's a Father's Day
Yeah, that's
episode.
a Father's Day episode. Yep.
Okay, all right.
All right, everyone. Have a great night. See you later. Bye.